Okay, so on this channel, we talk all the time about how Session 0 is super, super important, because it is. But Session 0 can only be important if you do it the right way. And honestly, it's not that hard to do. You communicate the content of your games, the stuff that the players are going to be interacting with, and you get them ready to go on this epic adventure with you and the rest of their party. Session 0 is great. However, I have a pet peeve. There's something that I've noticed in both Session 0s and in pitches for games, which we're going to talk about both in this video. But something I've noticed that I absolutely despise. It is a pet peeve of mine that I cannot stand, and I will have no more of it. Today, we're going to be putting an end to this crap. And that pet peeve is this. I don't like it, despise it in fact, when Dungeon Masters put in their pitch or in their Session 0 that this game that you're going to be playing has a mix of seriousness and comedy, also known as the most unhelpful thing in the history of pitches. Seriously, saying a combination of seriousness and comedy is just about the most vague way you could describe the tone of your game. It's very unhelpful for getting players into your server, and if you want people to be interested and invested, you gotta be a tad more specific than that. So today, we're gonna be talking about how to communicate the tone of your D&D game, and furthermore, if you're having problems getting people into the doors in the first place, if you're a dungeon master who needs players and has been struggling on LFG, well, we're gonna be giving you a little bit of guidance on that too. So without further ado, guys, let's get started. Okay, I know what you're probably thinking. Crispy, what's the big deal? Lots of D&D games are a mix of seriousness and comedy. That is the big deal. That's what I'm talking about. Lots of D&D games are a mix of seriousness and comedy. Beyond that, most stuff is a mix of seriousness and comedy. Okay, take The Wire, for example. The Wire is a show that aired on HBO and is probably one of the greatest shows of all time. It is a grim look at the flaws with American society, a grim look at issues with government, with police, with education, the brutality of gang warfare. It is a deeply depressing show, and it's brilliantly done. It's also one of the funniest shows I've ever watched in my life. Like, seriously, some of these jokes hit so hard.
Yeah. Do the chair know we gonna look like some punk-ass bitches out there?
In the same show where Idris Elba is hilariously lecturing a gang member on taking notes during a criminal conspiracy, Idris Elba is also having a literal child get murdered. This show is very grim, but also funny. A mix of seriousness and comedy. Now, look at The Owl House. The Owl House is a cartoon that aired on the Disney Channel and is really funny. It is a lot of lighthearted adventure, but it also has some really grim content. I mean, the big bad evil guy of the show is trying to have an entire race, an entire country of people murdered because of his bigotry. It's definitely a show with the dark side. Beyond the tyrannical big bad evil guy, it takes up themes of abandonment and depression, and you know what? It's good at it too. It's a mix of seriousness and comedy. Now, are you gonna tell me that The Owl House and The Wire are comparable in tone? No, of course not. Now, I know that that is a very extreme example. Comparing a grim HBO show to a Disney Channel cartoon, yeah, extreme. But when you take it to the tabletop world, it gets just as bad. I mean, look at Critical Role. Critical Role has their main campaign, and they have Kandala Obscura running right now. Kandala Obscura and Critical Role's main campaign are completely divorced in terms of tone, but they both have a mix of seriousness and comedy. Can you see the problem here? That is way too vague and could describe the tone of so many things. And that's why I think as Dungeon Masters, when you are talking to your players, or worse, you're pitching to strangers who want to join your game, when you are doing that and you use a mix of seriousness and comedy as your initial pitch for the tone of the game, I don't think anyone is going to really be interested in that, because that could describe literally anything. I know what some of you may be thinking as the follow-up. Why does this matter? You know, what does the tone of the game really bring? And if you're asking that, well, I don't know what to tell you, man. It brings a lot. For a lot of players, even if they don't know it, the tone of the game is the make or break. I mean, it's the initial deciding factor for why someone joins a game in the first place. And I know, hey, some D&D games have tones that don't matter. They're just for the yucks. But that in itself is a tone, dude. If you have a game where the tone doesn't matter, that also needs to be communicated to the players. All of this matters. Tone matters. It is the central focus for why people get invested in stories in general, based on the tone. Okay, so we've established why this matters and why what we see here does not work. So what's the alternative? What's the substitute? What do you say instead? Well, let's get into that. I think the best thing you could do here is to lean into something we talked about last episode and something I've already done. Use analogy. Use what you're taking inspiration from. And don't you dare tell me that you're not taking inspiration from anything. You are. Okay? You are. Look at what you're taking inspiration from. Look at what makes it fun for you. Look at the tone. For example, in my home game, my game is very much based on the tone of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and shows like it. It is a very adventurous show with room for more serious character moments. However, when we do get those serious character moments, we're not tackling such intense themes that The Wire tackles, for example. I mean, yeah, it's serious, but it's not grim to the core, right? For the most part, in general, the adventure is very fun. It's character-focused. That is what I enjoyed about Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think it's not really enough to say my game is like Avatar, for a reason I'm also going to get into later, but for the main reason being that not everyone has watched Avatar. I think it is worth it to investigate what the tone of the thing you're basing your D&D game off of is. Look at that tone and analyze what you like about it. Not only is it good for communicating to the players, but it's good for you as a dungeon master. When you interrogate the tone, I think it makes you a better storyteller. You better understand what you are trying to build up. When you don't do this, I think it leaves you with a lot of holes when you're writing out this world for your players to explore. Now, it's really, really important to divorce tone from content. This is that other big reason that I talked about earlier. When you're talking about your game and you say it's like Avatar: The Last Airbender, a lot of people are not going to assume that you're talking about tone initially. Some people are going to assume that you're also talking about content. Now, I don't know about you, but my game's content is nothing like Avatar: The Last Airbender at all. It's a point A to point B story that takes place in a desolate world, a la God of War, with big stakes, a la Lord of the Rings. That is much more the content of my game. If I just told people it's like Avatar, they're going to assume some things about the content of the adventure that they're going to be engaging in, and they're going to assume some things wrong. I will be setting false expectations, and there's a lot of ways to mess up Session Zero, but setting up expectations that are wrong is a really, really big one. The main purpose of Session Zero in the first place is to make sure that people understand what they're going to get into. If you mislead them, that's obviously really bad, and you really, really shouldn't do it. Similar to tone, don't just use the names of properties to communicate the content of your games. Make sure to interrogate, what are you taking from these properties? For me, when I'm taking inspiration from God of War, I'm taking inspiration from the desolate nature of the world. Sometimes it feels grim and empty, quiet even, filled with monsters that are mysterious and unknown to the players. They find help, they find people, they find refuge, but it's few and far between. And when I'm taking inspiration from Lord of the Rings, I'm taking the stakes. Like, yeah, this is a small thing that they're doing. All they gotta do is go from point A to point B. In essence, a simple journey with big consequences. Those are the pieces of content that I'm taking out. Just like with tone, interrogate what you're taking out, and I think it'll make you a better dungeon master and a better communicator as well. Okay, just to end off here, I want to talk about why I don't like this advice in general, and something that I think you should apply to the rest of your Session Zero and your pitch. Now, just like how we're divorcing tone from content, we also need to divorce the Session Zero from the pitch, because often they're very different things. The pitch for your game is usually pretty short. The pitch is the initial, hey, do you want to join my D&D game or my tabletop role-playing game? This is what it's about. This is your LFG post, your paid D&D post, your text message to your friend asking if they want to join you up. This is... Now, honestly, I'm not really good at pitching D&D games. I mean, I've pitched lots of things in my life and in my career, but D&D games, usually I don't need to pitch them because I have friends who are interested in playing just whatever I've got for them, and that's usually who I'm playing with. So the amount of times I have to pitch an adventure, few and far between. But when I'm doing actual plays, I do need to pitch, and I have been getting slightly better at it. But yeah, you should communicate all of this during your pitch. Your tone, your content, these are important things. Now, you can't get too in the weeds on it, because again, a pitch needs to be short. No matter whether you're professional or casual with your pitching, it always is short. That's like rule number 1 of pitching anything. Keep it short, keep it simple. Just because it's short doesn't mean it's content free. You still need to fill it with something, and the tone and the content of your game, even if you're summarizing it, that is a great way to fill your pitch out. When you get to session 0, that is when you elaborate, and that is where you have room for elaboration. You don't want to be vague. That is the big thing that bothers me with the way people communicate in their session 0 sometimes. They are so vague. I had one session 0 with a DM who was a nice guy, all things considered, but I had my issues with the way that they portrayed their session 0. They said this game was like Bloodborne. It was a world with tons of windows. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, the architecture takes inspiration from Bloodborne, I assume, based on the Windows comment, but what about the rest of Bloodborne? Like, is this a hopeless Lovecraftian adventure? Is that the tone? Is the content gonna be like Bloodborne? Is the difficulty gonna be like Bloodborne? Like, you can't just say it's like Bloodborne and say you can't just say it's like Bloodborne. You gotta elaborate a little bit more. I mean, look at that. It's kind of funny. My advice of using analogies could be just as bad as saying it's a mix of seriousness and comedy, because those specific comments are not the issue. The issue is vagueness. The issue is not elaborating. The issue is not understanding what exactly you're getting your players into, or probably more specifically, not understanding how to communicate it. I can't give you a catch-all. I can't give you a script to read during your session 0 so that your players understand what they're getting into, because I'm not playing your game. I mean, I don't know what you're playing. So you, the Dungeon Master, you need to figure it out. You do need to figure out how you're going to communicate this. And I think, in general, not only is this going to help you with your communication, like I've said multiple times in this video, I think it's going to make you better at your game. Understanding what you are running, what you're putting your players through, is prime on important things to do before your D&D game. Pointy Hat did his own video on things you need to know before your D&D game, and a lot of things we talked about here, he also talked about in his video. I recommend you check it out. But for me, the number one thing you need to understand, just baseline, that I could summarize the whole piece of advice for, is understand what you are running and how to tell people about it. Because if you can't do those two things, I don't think you're ready to run your game. Figure out those two things first. Then start getting people into it. And I promise you, the whole process is going to be so much easier. All right. So, pretty quick recording. I had a lot to say on this topic, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did, then please leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our Q and Play series. We got a new episode coming out next week. It's linked in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. No more vagueness, to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.